All right. Welcome to Eat, Play, Chug podcast, everybody. I'm Joshua Levy, joined with my co-host yet again, Vince. How you doing, Vince?
I'm doing well. I think we took 1 week off, relaxed, ready to go. Well, maybe not relaxed and all that, but certainly ready to go. Excited about our conversations today and the topics that we have, and looking forward to delivering some more content prior to the Christmas break.
Yeah, we certainly have. We did take a week off, and we certainly have a lot to be congratulatory, particularly to you, Vince. I know you closed on a house, and things have been kind of up in the air and crazy, and that's why we had to take a week off. But well deserved.
We're back. Thank you. Yep, we're back. We're ready to go. So I'll have a new home base here starting next week. Well, once we go and get internet. I know that's everyone's issue when you move into a house and you have no internet for the week or two. What do you do?
Yeah.
And no TV. You have nothing. You play a lot of Scrabble. That's what you do.
Really? I didn't even know that. Anyways, yeah. If you guys hear an echo in Vince's room, I think he's recording from an empty apartment right now. So this is old.
Yep, empty apartment with one piece of furniture. So it sounds like an opera house, but don't worry, we're bringing in good content today.
Cool. So the first thing I wanted to talk today about, Vince, is the Sarah Fuller sports fiasco. It's the first girl in a Big Five college football game to play, and she's been getting a lot of great reviews. When she was announced that she was going to actually play on the Vanderbilt football team, I was pretty interested. I was like pretty excited. Like I saw some footage reel of her playing soccer, and she seems like a badass actually on the soccer pitch. But I want to try to tread lightly on this one, because when she got on the field and she kicked, it was she got on the field for the first time in the second half of the Vanderbilt game. I think this is 2 weeks ago now at this point. And everybody was all up on the edge of their seat. They're chanting and raving for her. And then she kicks off and the whole stadium goes silent. The ball goes 30 yards. And I had a little bit of, an uneasiness watching it. That's the best way I could put it, because this was pretty well hyped. But when you look at how far the ball went, and then you take other things into consideration, like, I don't know, Vanderbilt's record and the score of the game, it just seems like this was a PR stunt. And particularly because the ball went 30 yards and the coach afterwards was praising the ground that she walked on for just being on the field, for what it seemed like.
Yeah, I in regards to this, it's kind of funny. I think, obviously they wanted to break some ground in this, right? I think their season's pretty much right. It's over. It's lost. So I don't think it was a big an issue to them to bring on someone like her. Obviously, you could state as well, the male kickers ahead of her, right, weren't good either. I don't think she would have got this opportunity. So, I'm like this, right? There's definitely this is kind of where I kind of make my opinion on this stuff. I don't have a problem bringing women into sports. Certainly, I think the football is probably the toughest one, just because, right? I mean, men are just ginormous human beings, specifically in the NFL and college football. Like, it's a rough sport. So I don't, maybe bringing someone in actually playing like linebacker, right? A female playing linebacker or D tackle. I don't know if that would work. That's right. A kicker, sure, try it. I guess. I know that, she did the kickoff, then she made it PAT, and then obviously their season was over. And I know we previously talked about it off air, right? The coach was fired. I think this is more so, just kind of what you said at the top of the bit is a PR stunt, right? So when you start with like bringing women into sports, which I have no problem with, right? We've seen some prominent women in sports with Jennifer Welter, who started with the Cardinals back in 2015. as the defensive coach, being an intern there. So she was really the groundbreaker in regards to the NFL coming out and being a coach and so forth. And I know she actually played, I think it was like semi-pro, like the female version of the semi-pro leagues for NFL or so forth. So that was one. And then, one that hits close to home for us out here in San Francisco is Katie Sowers, who's under Kyle Shanahan's regime. And she's working with them as well. She was on the Super Bowl team, right? So she was the first woman to be on a Super Bowl team. And she's been an offensive assistant, which all the players rave about her. So I think there's different areas where women are getting involved in sports now. And I don't mind it in any facet. I just, and I love it. Like, you're seeing more now, say, even with, the Miami Marlins, right? You have the GM now.
Yeah.
So she's now the GM of the Marlins. And that was groundbreaking, right? But she also had been in sports, being, Dodgers and so forth for so long. So Kim so she's been in forever. But anyways, just to wrap this up into the long tangent here, I think it's great for sports to bring him in. I don't know if like bringing in a woman to actually play, like say in the NFL, the MLB, or the NBA, makes a lot of sense. But in coaching roles, I don't see why not. And in front office, I don't see why not either. And I think, like you said, just to wrap that up, her coming in as the kicker was just kind of a, hey, maybe the coach is going to lose his job. Let's now make a statement here as, the first woman to kick, off and then kick a PAT in a top 5 conference.
Yeah. No, and just to add like one thing to that, I was talking about this with my fiance the other day, and she's like, "Why can't you just be happy for Katie Fuller?" And it's not like I want to just say it's not like I'm not happy for Katie Fuller or Sarah Fuller. I'm sorry, because what she did. If I'm Sarah Fuller, I must feel great about myself. Man, I played in a college football game, in a men's college football game. That's fucking awesome, right? But the thing is, when you look at the sport in general, college football, you want the main thing, the most important thing for college football is that it's competitive. And when you bring a girl onto the field that is not meant to enhance the competition, it's merely meant to sell, jerseys or T-shirts or headlines. I think it's bad. It's definitely bad for the sport, and on top of that, I think it's bad for women, because if this idea is added on, if this is drawn out to where now you've got pressure from the media or pressure from society in general to keep adding women to the sport, then now you start risking actual degradation of the sport itself, because no longer is it going to be about competition. It's going to be about participation. It's going to be about it's going to be about participation. And the thing is, when women participate in sports in a competitive aspect, then that is glass shattering and noteworthy and should get all the headlines, like Kim Ng for the Marlins just recently becoming the GM. Like that's awesome. That's incredible. Obviously she'd have to be Asian, but it's definitely still glass ceiling shattering and great for the sport, I think.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. I think more women in sports, the better. When it comes to the play, I just think it's difficult, right? We talked about, right? It's just difficult for a woman to come in and play an actual
especially
football game, NFL, or anything.
Think about it. But think about it. Like,
maybe I'm wrong.
If Sarah Fuller kicked off the ball, right? Let's say she had an awesome kick. It was only 30 yards, but let's say it went 50, 60 yards, right? And then she started participating in the downfield action. She starts running into where all the guys are tackling each other, and then some guy comes in and just lays her out, right? Typically that would be, everybody would be chanting and think it would be like exciting. What would happen? Yeah. What would happen? What would the media's response be if someone just laid her out?
That's actually a good point, right? If you think about I know they ruled out the crackback block, which is, someone running and then you kind of ear hole them so they go flying. It's what happened to Kurt Warner and ended his career against the Saints in the playoffs when he was on the Cardinals. It would be interesting because that's a huge hit everyone wants to see. And if it happened on a woman, it would be like, hey, man, that was effed up. Like,
Yeah.
what are you doing?
Exactly.
Or is it like, wow, great hit? Yes, that's what we're talking about. Like, yeah, I don't know. And I would honestly, just because human instinct, let's just go kind of, with how perception is, right? And how people just naturally think. I think everyone would be siding like, wow, what are you doing? What the F, right? That's just kind of the basic human instinct of, respect a woman, treat a woman right.
Yeah.
Like, don't do wrong by that, right? That kind of thing. And then you go and lay her out. Like, I agree. I think that would be a huge uproar. Then it's like, well, then why is she playing? Right.
Yeah.
If you're out there on the field, you're part of the game. You're a chess piece. You're open to contact. So that's a great point.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And so just to move on from that, and tie it together with the next topic, the coach, the Vanderbilt coach, he praised Sarah Fuller's, kick after the first game. The ball went 30 yards, but the coach's words himself said, he said, that was designed, meant for her because that's what she was used to striking. We tried to go with the most natural kicks in her arsenal. I thought she punched it exactly where she needed to punch it. Ball's down, 35-yard line, let's go. And it's a good coach standing by their player.
Yep.
But the guy was fired right afterwards. The team has not been doing well this year. The game was lost 41 points to nothing. And this prompted the media to lash out yet again. And you saw the articles shortly afterwards that there weren't enough black NFL or black football coaches around the league. So this kind of treads into another dicey area where now you have the commissioner of the NFL, Roger Goodell. He's getting the owners to approve a proposal that will reward teams for developing minority coaches and front office executives who go on to become head coaches and general managers for other organizations. Now, it's still subject to NFL Players Association approval, but under this proposal, teams will receive a third-round compensatory pick for 2 consecutive years if a team loses a minority coach and an executive to HC and GM roles. So Vince, what are your thoughts on this? I guess let's start there. What are your thoughts on this?
It's a time in the world right now where we see, worldwide, specifically as well in the United States, where racism has been brought to the forefront, and people are addressing that wholeheartedly with protests and if it strikes or whatever it may be, of course, of some of the killings by police brutality and so forth that have come forth, and with this has come the minority aspects, but as well not only minority in regards to the religion or how you look or your ethnicity, but as well from a standpoint of gender equality with male and female. All of that has come to the forefront, and where now we're digesting that and actually beginning to, if you will, break barriers, right? So the whole new theme of 2020 going into 2021, Biden is elected, right? Having Kamala Harris as the first woman VP. A lot of this now moving forward, just around in sports specifically, but as well, obviously, just our everyday lives, is really around this groundbreaking of bringing in, minority, if it's minorities from a standpoint of GMs and coaches, if it's bringing in Sarah Fuller to be the kicker as the first female to kick, right? If it's Kamala Harris as the first VP, across the board, right? It's all about having more equality and balance, I guess, for females as well as all ethnicities, religions, and so forth to have the ability to take part in some of these positions of power. Um, so it's interesting that the NFL is doing that, just from the standpoint of they're rewarding teams for bringing on, an African American or a person of color, which in itself is pretty much a slap in the face. To reward someone to do that, it shouldn't have to be that way, right? It should just be the most qualified person. I know we even go back to like the Rooney rule, which states that you have to at least interview one person of color, prior to hiring, say, a white person. At the end of the day, regardless of color, regardless of religion, regardless of ethnicity, the person that should be hired is the person that's most qualified.
Mm-hmm.
That is what it should be. Absolutely understand, right? No question. There's no doubt a lack of African American people in power in the NFL, probably in the NBA as well, and MLB, from head coaches to GMs, right? I can think of two head coaches, Mike Tomlin and then Brian Flores, Steelers and Miami Dolphins. Really the only two, I believe, in the NFL. I can't think of any others off the top of my head. And then you think about GMs, right? How many? I think Doug Williams, if he's not gone already from the Washington football team. So I think there's just a lot of change, but I think the NFL putting out a reward for doing it, I don't know. It's just, I don't know if it sends the right message.
Yeah, that's the step
I don't think
too far,
it's
right? Because what if it was the opposite way, right? What if it was, Roger Goodell incentivizing teams to hire white players, because there aren't as many white players on the field, like actual players, and there are more positions for the actual athletes than there are coaching positions, I would think. And another aspect that I don't think anyone's talking about are what percentage of the pool of candidates are Black? Because if you want to make the argument that there aren't enough Black coaches in the NFL, you got to show me, are they being, are they being discriminated because they're Black, or is it because there are less Black candidates out there? That's the part, I can be convinced it's, the NFL is racist, because they clearly are. I mean, they're incentivizing black head positions right now. I can be convinced, but you have to explain to me how and why they're being discriminated against, and prove it.
There is one individual, just to bring it up. He's on ESPN, Louis Riddick, and I know he's interviewed for multiple GM positions over the course of the years, and he's still working for ESPN, which in my opinion, I would rather work in TV than work in a front office, just because of the stress. And there's not a lot of longevity with that, right? You go on to ESPN, you can work there 25, 30 years. You go into GM and you have three bad seasons, on a 4 or 5 year deal. It's about it. You're done, right? And then you're casted off, and you go into more, a minority role, lesser of the GM role, or say VP of player operations or team president. So Louis Riddick is one that comes to mind. I know he's interviewed a lot across many organizations, and he's one individual who has yet to be hired. So I think if there is the example that people do bring up, it's Louis Riddick, and I think he's highly qualified for it. He actually scouted Sean Taylor when he was with the Washington Redskins, and brought him in. Louis Riddick, right? He played for the Raiders, so he was a DB for them, and he actually brought in Sean Taylor, one of the best safeties that could have been. Certainly was one of the greatest when he was there. So I think he has the chops for it, and this kind of, bodes into it. But, I think we always go back to the thing. It's, maybe it is about race, because we have talked about it, Josh, right? The NFL is, by our opinion, right, is the most racist league. I think that's pretty obvious. And John Middlecoff talk about it as well in regards to the short-term contracts and the less of guarantees and so forth. Mm-hmm. But it's a tough one to go through, because at the end of the day, who needs to be hired is the best person for the job. And you could argue, though, there's a lot of, Caucasian people who have been hired who probably aren't qualified. So I'll leave it at that.
That's a good point. And to go back to Vanderbilt, there's probably not. I mean, Sarah Fuller might be the most qualified football player on that team. So
they were 0-9, right?
yeah.
If we look at the record, we were what 0-9 in conference, 0-9 overall, 0-5 at home, 0-4 away, with a streak of 9 losses in a row.
Yeah.
I think you nailed it on the head with that one. That was a PR stunt. The guy knew he was out, right? He probably got his walking papers prior and said, you know what, let's let it rip. Let's just do it. And then bam, he did it. Or maybe it was against what they said and he just wanted to stick it to the AD and he did it, right? We don't know the background story there. And
I think they just
maybe
had nothing
hopefully
else
that'll come out.
I think they just had nothing else to play for that season. I mean, how else are you going to get an 0-9 team on national television or any sort of publicity other than throwing a girl out there?
Exactly. I think the one thing, and this is kind of off topic, but which is funny, and I think we would love to hear about, right? What was the background around that? Was it the coach sticking it to the AD and saying, you know what, screw it, you told me no, I'm going to do it, which then he got fired. So that kind of does make sense. We can probably go through tons of conspiracy theories. In last night's Ravens and Browns game, which arguably the best game of the season, shootout back and forth, had very much like that college style of play. It's like, a Texas Tech Oklahoma game. You got Mahomes versus Baker Mayfield. It very much had that with Lamar Jackson versus Baker Mayfield. What was funny was back in the NBA finals when Paul Pierce was wheelchaired out, there were supposed rumors around that he was actually wheelchaired out because he had to take an S. And with that, what I mean by an S is I mean when you have a coffee and things start to rumble. And so what happened last night was Lamar Jackson was cramping up and said he had to go get some salt. What he stated is that he pulled a Paul Pierce. So really what he had to do mid-game was go take an S and then came out and for the third down play and then threw a touchdown pass.
Wait, are you talking about Paul Pierce when he gets injured and has to get carried off into the locker room?
In the wheelchair. Yeah, he had to take an S. I think he might have S'd himself.
Are you saying, because I didn't know this, I remember this game like vividly. He gets carried off, he can't walk into the locker room, and then 2 minutes later he's running back out on the court. So you're telling me that he got carted off, he couldn't walk because he had to take a dump so large he couldn't use his legs.
That or it was already in his pants. So it's one or the other. I thought it was funny because he came out, I think it was maybe a year ago, and he came out and he admitted it on TV with Rachel Nichols on that TV show on ESPN and admitted it. It was like 11 years after the fact. Yeah, it was 2009. So 11 years after the fact. And then you had Lamar Jackson, shouting out a reference of, yeah, sorry, I just had to pull a Paul Pierce. Like,
that's
pretty good.
Great.
Pretty
Wow.
good. So, that's the type of background information we need about the Sarah Fuller, head coach, AD. What was that? Let's get that story. That's a juicy story. I just want to understand kind of why he put her out there, if you will, to break, the glass ceiling, the barrier, whatever you want to call it. And then obviously, right, he was the sacrificial lamb at the end of that. Certainly the record called for him to be fired, but I think this was, as you talked about, the PR statement and his last hoorah.
Right. So if there are any more organizational nuggets that we find or the media releases, then we will definitely report them next week. But speaking of organizational changes and switching sports here, I want to just quickly talk about, maybe not quickly because the guy is an interesting guy. I want to talk about Steve Cohen buying the Mets. And I can't imagine Mets fans are too upset right now. I mean, with the early moves that Steve Cohen's, making, I think he just signed the catcher James McCann for four-year deal worth over $40 million. I mean, hats off to Detroit fans. We've got a friend, Kyle, is a diehard Detroit fan, and the guy can't catch a break. James McCann, I think, was DFA'd after 2 seasons with Detroit, and now he's getting a $40 million contract with the Mets. I mean, albeit it is the Mets, so I mean, if I try to take my biased Braves hat off, I still look at the Mets as like a joke of a franchise. But now they're a
Yep.
joke of a franchise with an unlimited deep pocket.
The funniest thing about Steve Cohen, so he comes in, right? He was going up against A-Rod and J-Lo. Steve Cohen just, that's the best pick, obviously fit for the MLB, right? I don't think you want, A-Royd involved in any type of ownership, just for the standpoint of his background. I don't think that would be good for the MLB.
Yeah.
Having J-Lo part owner, wouldn't mind it.
Wouldn't mind that. Yeah.
That's one thing we'll miss. But let's get back to Steve Cohen. So
all
Steve
about
Cohen,
inclusivity 14, there.
Absolutely. We probably would. I mean, if she came in, we probably would have got cheerleaders. So that's 50, a big mess.
She's 51. She's still a smoke.
51, very beautiful. Still can shake it, and she doesn't drink, and she's on a very limited diet, just like Tom Brady, TB12. So
yeah, and she probably would have done a World Series World Series show.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, no question. So I think we missed on that one, but let's get back to Steve Cohen. So Steve Cohen, worth $14 billion, massive art collection. Has gone through. He had insider trading, with his firm, where just paid a cool $615 million, the most ever paid to the feds in regards to an issue like this. So just not really big money. He's come in and basically stated, willingly, like, I will lose $100 million yearly in order to make this team a winner. So that tells you right away he's going to spend money. And what did he do right off the bat? Yes, he spent money. He went to James McCann, gave him one of the richest deals in the history at a catcher in regards to being non-tender in 2018. 4-year, $40 million, cheaper than what Real Muto will get. And I think it's a great signing for the Mets because I think he's improved a ton. The funniest thing is, and we'll go through the non-tendered piece, but non-tendered in 2018 and then gets one of the bigger deals in regards to catchers. Obviously, Buster Posey has got read a tenure, I think, of 100, 120. Real Muto will get his as well. But it's certainly a big deal for him coming off that. And as well, I think he's between 29 and 31, something like that. So that's an interesting piece there. He wasn't a great defender, which is interesting. I think he's improved a lot, but he wasn't a great defender. I think it's a good risk, and I think that's what you're going to see a lot from Steve Cohen. You're going to see a lot of risks. I think they're calculated, though, right? Having a hedge fund is all about that, right? You're making investments in companies, you're buying companies, you're moving companies around, right? You're getting insider trading stuff, right? He's making calculated risks. This guy's a very smart man. He knows exactly how to make an investment. Like I stated, we'll talk about his art collection. So I think this is the start of a very expensive offseason for the Mets. And as you stated, Josh, I think if you're a Phillies fan, if you're a Marlins fan, if you're a Braves fan, you got to be a little concerned just because of the pocket that Steve has.
Yeah, I do have a little bit of nostalgia thinking about the days of Ted Turner owning the Braves, how he just bought players, and he just invested in the team because he wanted to win. And Ted Turner was he was a force in the media. He obviously had Turner Classic Sports. What's his network? Turner Classic Network, I think it was. Yeah. And he basically paved the way for, Braves fans to become Braves fans all around the world. That's why you have people like Julio Teheran being a Braves fan growing up in the Netherlands because, he watched guys like Andrew Jones growing up.
Yep.
You have
one of my favorites.
Yeah. I mean, Andrew Jones, classic. He's also a glass ceiling breaker, being one of the youngest kids ever to hit a home run in the World Series. And has that infamous Spider-Man catch. Will be the greatest center fielder in my book of all time. Not biased at all, but yeah, this Steve Cohen thing, it definitely makes me a little bit nervous as a Braves fan. I'm not sure. You know what? I have to tip my hat, because with Steve Cohen going down, the James McCann signing just recently, and the Robinson Cano PED scandal, where he's now not, he's going to forego his, what is it, $20+ million contract. That actually benefits the Mets. I think the cards are falling perfectly for the Mets this offseason. And, they weren't a bad team last year. They weren't a bad. The Cespedes is coming off the books now. You have Robinson Cano obviously off the books now. They've got, even if without Steve Cohen, they've got a lot of money to play with. And obviously they went out quickly, turned around James McCann deal. I'm happy that Alex Anthopoulos for the Braves, he's a fast mover. So, he instantly goes off and signs Drew Smyly, and the pitcher for Tampa Bay, Charlie Morton, bringing him back to Atlanta. So he's solidified that rotation. But, with question marks for me, one of the biggest question marks for me this offseason was the 4-hole spot in our lineup. And Marcell Ozuna leaving this year. He becomes now all of a sudden this fascinating and very good fitting target for the Mets. And, you can see a huge swing in I guess power. I would say the power rankings in the NL East, which is one of the best leagues in the MLB. So I am pretty nervous, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think you have to be. But one thing too, like, do we even play this upcoming season? I mean, maybe obviously I think we'll play it, but I think that's why the offseason has been so slow, and why there's probably room for optimism around, right? When we'll talk about some of these people who are non-tendered, just because a lot of these organizations don't want to spend money, right? There's no understanding of path of revenue. We have no understanding of if fans will be back in the seats. Our merchandise sales down, I'm sure of it. TV ratings are down. We know of that. And there were great players who are non-tendered, who deserve a good sized contract, and who are gone now. Now there's rumors today, right, from Nightingale talking about how the MLB standpoint of the Player Association and the owners are at odds of starting the season before April, due to the fact of that these players should be vaccinated prior to going to spring training.
Oh my gosh.
So this will be, we'll find out what this means, right? But how does this affect the offseason? How do teams spend? We already saw it in the tender market where there's been great players who have been non-tendered, right? And then they're re-signing at very low dollar values. And I think that's a great one for us to go into, next year. But it's interesting to see you get a big contract like a 4-year $40 in a time of this. I mean, that's a huge win for James McCann. And if the Mets are going to pay players like that, I mean, honestly, if I'm an agent, I'm calling Steve Cohen and Sandy Alderson ASAP and going, hey, you need this guy. Let's talk dollar value. You're willing to lose money? Great. Lose it on my guy. Whereas such as like the Phillies, right, who are now trying to trade away all other players because they're in a huge revenue issue.
That is delicious, actually. Delicious. Well, let's start talking about some of the non-tender candidates. I know there's some interesting names out there, including Kyle Schwarber, who had a 3.0 F-WAR. He was a key part of that Cubs team in 2016, but he's returning from a torn ACL and LCL this year. He did hit a pretty respectable 412 with a 970 OPS in the Fall Classic, but that was in 2016. Sorry, but his production has been somewhat suppressed versus. I mean, he's got struggles against lefties, and posting a 188 with a 308 on base percentage and a 393 slugging, which aren't, good numbers. What are your thoughts on Kyle Schwarber, and what do you think he's going to land up?
I mean, I'm not sure where Schwarber would go. I think right, he can only hit one side. So I know obviously he hits lefty, but I think he probably hits righties better than he does lefties. I think that's why the Cubs decided not to bring him on. Obviously, the Cubs are going through a transition too, with their front office. So there's that going on. I think there's it just around the MLB specific to like smaller market teams, and certainly Cubs aren't that, but smaller market teams are now cutting cost. There's no point to bring on these players if they're not, for sure, surefire players that are going to produce in and out. One, like we can be specific about, and I know the Twins are doing a lot of this, right? Just forking out players. I know Eddie Rosario's one who, hits for low average, but has, pretty decent homer, totals. I think last year was kind of a weak year for him, but also he was going to be guaranteed basically, I think it was 8 or 9 million, which obviously you don't pay for a player who's hitting 236, and only like 19 to 20 bombs. The one that was interesting to me around this is Matt Weisler. So Matt Weisler, or Weisler, excuse me. That one's interesting to me because he was non-tendered. He was a good piece out of the bullpen. Yeah. Obviously, my Giants signed him for 1.15 million. What's interesting about it, though, he's 28 years old. He's young, right? In that time, and I'm just read a couple stats here. In a 25 and a third innings, he had a 1.07 ERA, punched out 35 hitters. That's a 12.4 K9 ratio. And he had a 13.9% swing strike rate. The one thing that he did, right, he started throwing a slider 83% of the time, to just give you an understanding of how much that is. Tony Romo, who is known for a slider, was throwing at 65. Okay. So that's how much more he's basically throwing a slider almost every time, right?
Yeah.
So it's, but with that said, I mean, 1.07 and you get, non-tendered, and then you sign for 1.15. If that doesn't tell you about the market, I don't know what it does. I mean, that alone it's just interesting to see. There's great talent out there who just non-tendered, and you're getting value, which Farhan for the Giants is always looking at value plays then to sell later at deadlines, right? To get back draft options or young minor leaguers.
Yeah.
I think it's just an interesting time because teams can spend. And certainly the Giants have big pocketbooks, but do they want to, knowing that, hey, we won't have fans or we won't have revenues from TV or so forth, right? I think you're going to see a lot of teams being cautious, and I think that's why the offseason has started off so slow. Really, the biggest signing to date is going to be James McCann. The biggest trade to date is going to be Lance Lynn to the White Sox, for Danny Dunning and others. That's why I'm interesting to see how this plays out. And I think it's going to continue to be slow. Certainly, I think it'll pick up. But now with this new news around this vaccine piece, around there could be a requirement to have these players vaccinated prior to going to spring training, maybe knocking down from 162 to 130. I think that's only going to delay the offseason more. So, and then right now, just to finish up this comment here, we've had the most non-tendered players of all time. This is the most non-tendered we've ever had in a single season. Okay. Yeah. So where do these players go when rosters are full? Do they sign minor league contracts and go down to the minors? Right. Who's willing to do that? Veteran players, usually, some aren't, unless you're at, the last wits of your playing career and you're signing, veteran mins. That's what's going to have to happen for some of these players who are actually pretty good.
Yeah, it really is interesting when you think about it, because Minnesota, they struck gold with Matt Whistler. I think letting him go for just $1 million. I mean, it's got to tell you that franchise is cash strapped. I mean, after dishing out a contract, a really, really kind of risky contract to Josh Donaldson, who's in his late 30s now, at a high average annual salary. I think it's over 25. I don't know what it is exactly off the top of my head. But yep. you gotta. I mean, it's weird though, because some teams can dish out some money, like the Mets, and obviously the Braves haven't been shy about signing anybody. But some teams like the Twins don't want to spend $1 million for a guy like Matt Whistler. And I'll say something about Matt Whistler. He's an interesting guy because he was a very, very highly rated prospect for the Padres. And I'll give you this little nugget of info is like in 2015, he was traded, excuse me, in 2015, he was traded to the Atlanta Braves along with Carlos Quentin, Cameron Maben, Jordan Powerbeck, and a draft pick in exchange for Craig Kimbrell, and Melvin Upton Jr. or BJ Upton.
Yep.
He went on to start a good season for the Braves that following year, and then just fell off the map. So I think he's got it in there. He's got it in his arsenal to be a good pitcher, and I think all the signs pointed to him rebounding actually quite nicely, kind of like Chris Sims did, who is a former first overall draft pick by the Atlanta Braves, who actually went a pick before, get this, before, who's that? I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the right fielder for the Yankees.
Judge Stanton.
Yeah, Judge. He went a pick before Judge, and he just burned out with the Atlanta Braves, and we traded him to Cincinnati for Adam Duvall, and he's been lights out in their bullpen. So guys like that, they have it in their arsenal. They're specimens. They can rebound if they work hard. And it seemed like Matt Whistler was on pace for him. So a good pickup for the Giants, in my opinion.
I agree. Absolutely. The one that's fascinating that I'm looking forward to seeing who he signs with, and we can throw out predictions, just because of how our teams are going to be spending it, and maybe the Mets come in and just grab them. Is Trevor Bauer. My prediction, I thought Padres would do it, but Padres are a smaller market team. I know they spent a lot, right? Yeah. Most recently. So I don't know. I'm just curious to see where he lands and how much money he gets. And I think that's the one that kind of defines, because that's the benchmark for pitching. Everything below that will fall in line in regards to how much they get per contract. But Trevor Bauer is the one that I'm interested in.
Dude, that would be.
I think the Padres will go and get him, but it could be the Mets come and swoop him just because they're willing to spend big money.
I just got night terrors, dude. I hated the way he pitched against the Braves in the playoffs. He was just mocking us the entire time. He's doing, like we talked about, that strut that what's that boxer name does after every match or before every match when he walks into the ring. That's that Irish boxer.
Oh, McGregor. He's just
that fucking cocksucker.
I think he's 0-1 as a boxer, so he's not exactly a boxer. Yeah,
well, he's striking out in life as well, like punching guys in bars and stuff like that. So
old men.
Yeah. So, and he was Bauer was doing that mock tomahawk chop as he was coming off the field for his last pitch. That would be fun to watch, though. That's the kind of signing that I'd be excited for. I mean, I think with the Phillies imploding now, you got to look at teams who are signing guys right now. I think are the teams with a lot of payroll flexibility, that don't have contract like those 12-year contracts for 15, 17, 20 plus $1 million per year. I know the Braves have Acuna on the books for 10 years, but like that guy's making only $100 million, which is amazing.
Yep.
And but you've got teams like the Padres who've got Machado on a $30 million a year, 10-year contract. You got the Phillies who've got Bryce Harper on a 30 I forgot what it is, 20, I think it was actually in the 20s, $27 million a year, but for the next 13 years. So if you have teams that have these risky long-term contracts, I think that they're looking at those long-term contracts more as a liability now these days, with the uncertainty around, the league and are players going to be able to be let in stands? Are they going to be able to sell tickets? Are people going to even be interested in watching the game after all the social media or the social justice initiatives? There's a lot of uncertainty, and I think you see the teams with the highest amount of payroll flexibility, Mets now being one of them, particularly because Robinson Cano and Cespedes coming off the books, and Steve Cohen. You have those teams, I think, are the ones that are setting themselves up nicely, and they're going to be, the ones that are going after each other.
The Mets should just go for it and go get Trevor Bauer and go Bauer or go DeGrom and Bauer. If they really want to go for it, they should just go get those two. And that would just be the 1-2 punch. That would be the best 1-2. If Steve Cohen is really, if I know he just did James McCann. That was a big deal for that guy. Like I said, not being non-tendered in 2018. But if you really want to put, your foot in front of the other and really put your, mouth behind your money, I think you go sign Bauer and you get a 1-2 punch of DeGrom Bauer. And that's when you're talking like, okay, now we have a staple, right? I think the rest of it, Matz and a couple of others, they're okay. But that I think you bring that in and you got something serious. And then you just need hitting, which they've hit a little bit. But with that, then as a Braves fan, I'd watch out.
Yeah.
Phillies, they're screwed. They got the Bryce Harper contract. Nationals did well there, stayed with Soto. That was smart. Soto's better than Harper. Put that on record.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is. I think so. I think so as well. But Soto, we can get into it. Soto would cost just as much as Harper. And I will give it to actual Bryce Harper when he's looking for a deal. I think he valued time over money, and he didn't want to be traded. And I kind of respect that in a player. Chipper Jones did something similar to that. He took less money to stay with the same team. And there's also the aspect of how it helps out your organization if you take less money and you're penciled into that 3 spot every single year for the next 10 years. That's pretty good. That's pretty nice. However, he's just he's a locker room parasite, man. He just sucks the wind out of the sails of all the players there. And I think somebody like who are we talking about? The other guy from the Nationals, Juan Soto. I think he's a breath of fresh air. He injects energy. He's got that obnoxious little strut at the box where he grabs his crotch after every pitch. And he's just one of those players that the other team just absolutely hates, absolutely despises, and wants to go after. So what was I even talking about? I think the more interesting topic that I wanted to kind of segue into, and how teams are going to try and construct themselves, will hinge kind of a lot around whether or not the DH is going to stick in the NL. Yeah. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on the DH? Do you like it? Do you think it should stay? And what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, I hope it does stay. I don't know if it will. Manfred has given us no indication of what the rules are for the next season. I hope it does. It opens up possibilities for NL teams to actually take on more players. I think it keeps more older players involved as well. So you add maybe 2 to 3 years to some of these, players that you could say are out, because when you get older, right, you just can't play the field. It's hard to play in the infield already, and then it's hard to play in the outfield. Sticking someone usually in left field was the way to hide them. You can't do that anymore. Once you can't run around or catch or any of that, you're out. So adding the DH, I think would be better for the NL. The other thing too, I don't really care about seeing pitchers hit. It's kind of a waste of them at bat.
Oh yeah.
Plus, if the MLB really wants to bring ratings back up, which they have been way down, obviously they juice the balls. First it was the players that were juicing. They're like, screw that, we can't have that anymore, so we'll just juice the balls. You've had more home runs now than during the steroid era, which is hilarious to me. So if you want to continue on that theme, you should continue the DH. So then you have, like I stated, older players coming in, but also you can have teams draft, not say for position. Like, I'm just going to use this because I'm a Giants fan. The Giants drafted Patrick Bailey, who's another catcher, right? Why would they do that? They have Joey Bart, who just came up. They have Buster Posey. Of course, he's probably got, a year or two left. But you could throw Buster into the DH. You have Bart catch. Then you have Patrick Bailey. right? Does Patrick Bailey become a third baseman? Does he sit at DH so he's full time, or does he go behind the plate and you move Burt to DH or first base, right? I think the DH gives teams more versatility. I think it allows more players to be picked within the draft because then it's more based on the bat than it is the field. But it also gives the opportunities to the veteran players to continue their career, especially if they're hitting, right? I mean, we're looking at Nelson Cruz. The guy's like 41 or 42 and still hitting bombs, right? But he can't play the field. Maybe first base at most, right? At most. And that's probably being generous to say he can play it. I think they put him there just maybe when they want to put like Miguel Sano in DH and give him a rest at third or first. But I think, as you saw it with Nelson Cruz, maybe even with Pujols, right? He's not hitting as much, but he is obviously being in the DH position. I think, Molina on Yadier on the Cardinals would be another one. They could throw in the DH to rest his knees, but I'm sure that guy will probably just want to catch all day. So, anyways, I think the DH is good. Take the pitchers out. Only ones that could really hit, right? Bumgarner or so forth. So there's not that many. So let's get more action. Let's get more offense. Let's get up there with the NFL ratings. We need action. We need hits. We need bombs. We need runs.
Yeah.
I think that's all based on the theme of juicing the balls.
Yeah, and I'm tired of this argument that you like this strategy of bunting. Like, first of all, the amount of times a pitcher puts down a successful bunt is got to be is I think I looked it up the other day. It's around 10%. So I don't want, and not only that, there is strategy for hitters, right? If there's a runner on third base, their strategy there would be to hit it into the outfield as far as you can. If it's a home run, that's even more exciting than a sacrifice fly. Or if there's a runner, at second base with no outs, you want to hit it to the right side of the field so that runner can advance on the ground. So it's not like there's no strategy for that you would see if you threw a DH in place of a hitter pitching. And on top of that, like, you get so much more offense. And I think that's exactly what not just fans like, but the commissioner likes. That's why they're juicing all the balls. And on top of that, there's so many things you could throw on top of that. But one of them is you extend players' careers, and you give teams like an insurance policy on players like Bryce Harper, or players like Albert Pujols, which you're seeing play out with Anaheim, and then you can actually have more players. I guess you have more players. You have more position players, and you inject more money into the roster. So it's like more money for everybody, more excitement. It's overall, I think, just much better. And then you get rid of this fucking this advantage for one of the AL teams visiting, or no, an NL team. The advantage for what the situation for when an NL team visits an AL team, I think the advantage definitely goes to the AL team because they're built to have a DH. Whereas, the NL team is not going to just sign an extra guy to play a few games in an AL versus NL matchup. And we as we've seen, a few like the league, the playoff spots can come down to a handful of games, and in a full season, what we're playing like 20 plus games against the interdivisional games. So a team's not going to sign a ninth bat just to play DH a handful of games. So you get rid of that disadvantage.
Yeah, the devil's advocate in me always says that, right, when it comes into like standard baseball postseason, right, it's played in the cold. You take like Giants versus Detroit, right? Miguel Cabrera, fielder, huge hitters. That was where NL was more prominent because it's hard to hit a home run ball. So the DH was actually irrelevant then, right? And I think, during the season right now, because we're playing in some of the summer, but even it came into, just a couple of months ago, Now you're seeing some of that where the ball's still flying out, but who won, right? The Dodgers. Obviously, the Dodgers have superior talent, but they can win with pitching. They win with DH. So it is. I think during the season, yeah, it's fun for us to watch the DH as, just another added hitter. But when it comes to like playoffs and World Series, it almost becomes irrelevant because that's where pitching is,
Yeah.
really tough. It's hard to grind out runs. You need to play small ball to manufacture. It's hard to hit home runs. Obviously we saw it. Azarena hit 10 or 11 in the postseason. But I think when it comes down to it, right, when you really got to win it in the World Series, you got to find a way to manufacture runs. And sometimes you win those ugly 2-3s or 3-2s. Obviously, this World Series was bonanza, right? We're playing in a dome, though, in Arlington, right? It's a bubbled thing. So it's the weather's irrelevant. The colds are relevant. So the heat, you could still hit the ball. I'm sure the ball was flying out more with the roof closed than it was with it open. But I think the devil's, advocate, the contrarian here is more, hey, yes, bring in the DH. Yes, you have more offense. But when it comes down to the playoffs, to the World Series, manufacturing a run and pitching always win. Still will continue to win. And so that's what I see, teams such as the Mets go and get 2 top line pitchers. You have ability to manufacture runs. I think that puts you in the race immediately.
God, the Mets are going to have so much money. So much money. What is their payroll? Let me look up their payroll is. Mets 2021.
I mean, I'll tell you what their payroll is. It's called an infinity. It doesn't matter, right? It's a soft cap with luxury tax, and if Cohen is willing to lose $100 million, it does not matter, right? This is like, think of the Mets like this now. Okay, this is a perfect illustration of who the Mets have become, not who they've become, but who they will become under Steve Cohen. Think of George Steinbrenner. Okay, George Steinbrenner with the Yankees back in the 90s, early 2000s. Right, I think they won 4 or 5 World Series under him. It's whatever Jeter has. I think it's 5. He would go and buy everyone. Like, it just didn't matter. I mean, pay everyone. Right, he brought in Reggie Jackson. Honestly, everyone. A-Rod, right, massive contracts. It did not matter. And I think you're going to get that exact same thing with Steve Cohen. It's not if, it's just when, and it's how much. Right.
Yeah.
Like that's what if they want someone enough, they're going to pay it. Yeah. And they're going to pay a lot. And the end cost, which you see with like some owners, we talk about Joe Lacob in the NBA who brought on Kelly Oubre and had to pay an $82 million tax bill just for Kelly Oubre. That's the kind of money where it doesn't matter. You have players who are in their primes now who maybe have 2 years left. You go for it now. You pay the penalty because that's what you do for those players who have provided you championships over the course of the last 3 to 4 years. You do that, right? Or you waste their prime and then your window closes, because every window closes. And how long does it stay open is really the question. So when you're there, you spend the money. Now the Mets have the opportunity to go there. Why waste DeGrom's, prime seasons, add another pitcher and keep going and spend all that money? That's exactly what George Steinbrenner did in the 90s, and that's why they won championships.
Yeah. The Mets active payroll, or the Mets total payroll next year, is going to be $144 million if they didn't sign anybody else right now. The luxury tax limit is $210. So that gives them about $65 million to play with. That's quite a lot. And, a guy like Steve Cohen, I can actually imagine him far exceeding that. So then the question is, how far do you think a owner like Steve Cohen would go above the luxury tax penalty line of 210? Because right now, I think what the policy is on luxury tax is that for every dollar you spend above the tax limit, you have to pay $1 or 50 cents to the players union or something like that. What is it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe it's like it goes into, and for the MLB, it goes into an index investment fund, and then it pays for player benefits. So that's the way they do it. Whereas like the NBA does more revenue sharing, right? They put it down on the smaller market teams who aren't in the luxury tax, or actually any team who's not in the luxury tax, and they give them their remaining funds that the luxury tax teams are currently paying. Um, yeah, I don't think there's a limit. That's I think the major point here. And we could beat a dead horse here. Steve Cohen's going to spend money. It's going to be a lot. He's going to go all out. He didn't buy this team for nothing. He's gonna spend. He's gonna spend. He's gonna spend. But it's not just going to be to spend. It's going to be spend on good talent and with calculated risks. Very much using analytics. This guy's a very smart man. So.
Yeah, and that actually brings up an interesting conversation in the luxury tax in baseball, because it's unique to sports, and I think it's actually one of the most beneficial for the sport there is, because you have the ability for a team to spend as much as they want, right? So you drive competition in the player market, right? So if a player wants to maximize his earnings, he can. I mean, teams are allowed to give them as much as they want, right? So it's not like basketball where they say, oh no, you can only make this amount of money, which I think is absurd. We've already talked about that, but it also, like, you also have to bake it into a player's contract. If you're a G or an owner, you have to bake it in that if you go too far above the luxury tax, you're actually redistributing funds to the league itself. So if you go, if you, the limit's 210 million right now. So if you go to, let's say, 250, you're spending $40 million gets redistributed partially to the players union, yes, but also to other teams. So that in turn helps. You get to a certain point, a tipping point, where if you want to sign the next player, you might actually be doing yourself harm, because you might be actually funding another team to get another player. And I think that just drives, healthy competition.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is it definitely does. The luxury tax. I mean, you're seeing teams like the Rays, right? I forget what they had. I think it was like $50 million in salary cap, right? Imagine if these teams had 50 more million to spend, right? So they just get to 100. You'd have a pretty outstanding team. So
yeah,
those teams paying the luxury tax, those are big owners behind it. They're in big markets. New York's a huge market. Mets haven't won and they still make money. If the Mets become a winner, right, that'd make Jerry Seinfeld very happy. And then you got Steve Cohen at the helm spending a ton of money. He would be the savior of the Mets. I mean, this guy would go down in Mets lore as the best owner of all time. So I'm looking forward to seeing it. I can't wait for the shopping spree. Certainly, I've done enough of my own shopping, as we mentioned, buying a house, and I've been on Amazon doing lightning deals for all the Christmas shopping, and certainly that's light change when it comes to Steve Cohen. I think we could get 10 of us in a room and couldn't spend anywhere near what he's going to do.
Oh my goodness! I just looked it up. Tampa Bay's payroll. Give me a guess. What do you think it is?
37 million.
Oof, that's not bad. That's not a bad guess. In 2020, the payroll was $28 million.
Wow.
And they went to the playoffs.
The Mets signed James McCann for 4-year, 40. So that's 10 million of that. So they have 18 million left. And I think the highest paid player on that team is Snell, and then behind him is Kiermaier.
Well, it was Charlie Morton. It was Charlie Morton.
It was Morton on and then I think it goes Snell, then Kiermaier. I think those are both $10 or $11 million deals, and then Morton's was 12 or 15, something like that. So,
in which I think I have to bring up, like, it's just the Mets. I think just have this arrogance that they're a New York big market team. They could do it and sign whoever and whatever what they want with players and development. I mean, they signed Tim Tebow, for Christ's sake, which go Gators, by the way. I love Tim Tebow. Yep. Tim Tebow, if you're watching, thank you for watching. And I really appreciate you and everything, and Jesus. And but I think the Mets have this arrogance that, you know, they're the New York Knicks of the MLB. And it just I just have to like put two and two together here. It's like I think it's that New York arrogance, New York area market arrogance that these owners, these organizations think that they can just blow money wherever they can. And I'm hoping that Steve Cohen falls into the same trap. But yeah, it's I can't imagine. I just have this skepticism about the Mets. Like, even though they've got all this going for them, they're still the New York Mets. They're still the New York Mets. I mean,
I think Steve Cohen changes that. I have the guy is one of the most interesting people. He's a very, very smart man. He's actually now the richest owner in the MLB.
Yeah.
So I'm telling you right now, if there's anyone who's going to change them around, it's him. And I think we'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see him actually do this because there's nothing better than the Mets being better than the Yankees, in my opinion, when it comes to New York sports.
All right. Well, that will do it for today, Vince. Thank you so much. What are your plans this weekend?
Oh my goodness. Unpacks every box I have. Hopefully get internet, which would be fantastic. I know my boss doesn't like that, so definitely like some internet back. And other than that, gonna relax a little bit. Already done with the shopping. Maybe go watch some people, you know, hit each other as they go get presents and so forth in this last weekend shopping spree.
Yeah.
But no, I'm gonna relax and then look forward to the Christmas holiday vacation with family. How about yourself?
I think I'll be doing a whole lot of nothing, so that'll be great.
Nothing is always good.
Yeah, man. Well, thank you for listening, everybody, and thank you, Vince, for your time again. I know it was tough with with the logistics and the internet and all that stuff. So, yeah. Well, hopefully we'll get that all settled and come back to you guys on a normal schedule next week.
Looking forward to it.
All right, guys. Thanks.